Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to A Grantmaker's Guide to a Strong Proposal webinar. We greatly appreciate you guys taking the time to visit with us Zoom for this webinar. We just think it's a great opportunity to connect with our nonprofits and really talk about some challenges we see through our various processes. But before we go into the details of this webinar, I'll go ahead and get started by introducing myself. My name is Daryl Houston. I'm the Vice President for Community Impact here at the Community Foundation for Palm Beach and Martin counties. And I'll let our two panelists introduce themselves, and then I'll have our Community Impact team introduce themselves, as well as our key member, Miss Brittany Peerbolt, introduce herself. So I'll turn it over to Elsa.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm Elsa Blanco-Bridgen, and I get to serve as Program Officer here at Quantum Foundation. Many of you may already know Quantum, but for those who don't, we're a private health foundation, which means that we invest in our own charitable assets through grants and partnerships focusing on improving health and the well-being of Palm Beach County residents. All our grant making stays here in the county. And Randy?
Mr. Randy.
Hi, everybody. Randy Palo with the Children's Services Council of Palm Beach County. We are a special taxing district, so we're a public organization. We're a government organization. And thanks to your property tax dollars, we fund programs for children and families throughout the county. It is limited to the county. You may hear, since we're talking about grant writing, we kind of have two quite different ways that we do funding. So I may refer to kind of our regular funding process, and that's often where we do very targeted requests for proposals for very specific things. We just did one, for example, for youth development programs where we funded $3 million worth of programs, and those are often multi-year. So much of our funding rolls over from year to year. But we also do something that I'm responsible for called the Great Ideas Initiative, and that is a one-year funding opportunity, and it's kind of open, as it sounds like, great ideas. We're looking for new ideas, innovative things, so that is a much more open process. While it does have a few limitations, a few parameters around it, it's mostly us looking for new ideas, so it's a much more open process. So again, you might hear me refer to our regular process, which again is very structured. But if I refer to the Great Ideas Initiative, that's much more of an open process. But glad to be here. And what are we up to? 109 people. So hello to 109.
Thanks, Randy. Let's go, Corey.
Good morning, everyone. Corey Murphy, Senior Community Impact Officer here at the Foundation. Super excited for this conversation. And I'm going to pass that on to Shanuka.
Hi, everybody. Shanuka Jerome, Community Impact Officer. I am also equally excited about this conversation and this opportunity to connect with you all. And I'll pass it on to Kara.
Thanks, Shanuka. Good morning, everybody. It's exciting to see everyone here on this call. And my name is Kara Rodriguez, and I am also a Community Impact Officer here with a wonderful team at the Community Foundation for Palm Beach and Martin counties. And we're really excited to have this conversation and hear insights and questions. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Daryl so we can get started.
We have one more post we want to introduce who's a very important part of this whole webinar and pulling these pieces together for us. Brittany, can you introduce yourself, please?
Happy to. Hi, I am the face behind all of the emails that you've all been getting about this event and all of the Community Foundation events. Brittany Peerbolt, Executive Director for Community Engagement.
Thank you, Brittany. And so before we open up and share the slides with you, just in terms of the Community Foundation of Palm Beach and Martin counties, we have a service area across Palm Beach County and Martin County. We have three core focus areas that we support, which is youth and families, youth and education, economic opportunity, and then thriving community. So it's pretty broad in the work that we fund across our geographical landscape. And with that, you can imagine the types of requests that come through our grant process. But I think this webinar hopefully will help aid and guide some of our community partners, and as well as those who potentially would like to partner with us, a little guidance in terms of what we're looking for in application, and what I would say across the board our three teams are seeing, from Quantum Foundation to Children's Services Council, Community Foundations, and some of our other key funders. A little housekeeping rules: please make sure you keep your mics on mute. There is a Q&A tab that you can click on to put your questions, send your questions into us, and we will save all questions till the end of the webinar for our Q&A session, and we'll dive deeper into those questions. And then lastly, hopefully, by the end of this webinar, you'll just have an opportunity to walk away with some key information. And so as Corey, can you pull up the slides for us? So as Corey is putting up the slide, one thing, what brought this webinar to our minds is we review applications across the board yearly, and through various processes and procedures that we all have set up with our respective organizations. And so from our Community Foundation team, we begin to see some of the challenges across the board for organizations that are submitting proposals. Many are, newer organizations that are going through our process. But just to make sure that we see what we think we're seeing, it was an opportunity for us to connect with some of our other community partners, like Quantum Foundation and Children's Services Council, to really ask the same questions of them. What are you seeing with challenges within your proposal process? Are you seeing some of the same things that the Community Foundation is running into that may prohibit an organization from making it across that finish line to receive funding through our competitive processes that we had? And so once again, this is not just coming from the lens of the team of the Community Foundation, but also some other respected community funders that are serving Palm Beach County nonprofits as well, and for us also Martin County. So that just brings a little context to our webinar. And so just waiting for our slides to pop up. Do you have it, Corey?
I do. I 1 second to get the share activity happening. Why is it not working? All right. Do we see the slides?
Yes, you see the slides.
Perfect.
All righty, so you can go over to the next slide, Corey. And so this is our speaking panel for as we mentioned earlier, Daryl Houston, Randy Palo, and Elsa Blanco Bridgen. One thing, just to let you guys know, I know that my photo, my beard is really nice and dark, and you see me now is really gray. I just haven't had time to update that photo. So that was the younger version of Daryl. So I think maybe Elsa looks exactly the same. Randy, I think we got to update our bio photos.
It's not going to happen.
All right, on to the next slide, Corey. So today's plan. So we looked at six key areas that we saw that were challenges. So one, we'll touch on understanding funders' guidelines. So when you look at a funder's web portal and you begin to decide whether or not you're going to apply for funding, it's important that you look at their guidelines, because all our guidelines are different. And so if you start one proposal, one organization, and you just use that same proposal for another, you may be setting yourself up for potential failure. Then next, reading and following instructions. Each process, as I mentioned, we have our own instructions and guidelines in place. So it's important that you follow those to make sure that you are in alignment with our general processes that we have set up for our grant competitive processes. Application components. And the application components, there are different areas, whether it's one is success stories, program descriptions, targeted populations. In this particular section of the proposal, we decided to take two key areas, once again, that we felt were challenges and red flags through all our processes. So we'll touch a little bit on the program descriptions as well as the targeted populations up on the application components. And then for the next section, we'll talk a little bit about programs requests versus general operating requests. We've heard from organizations year in and year out, how do we get general operating dollars to support our organizations? And now that for some of us that do provide general operating support, the challenge that we see is differentiating between a program request and a general operating request. Then the fifth section we'll touch on is budget development, truly understanding a realistic budget, and even more so, what are allowable expenses up under each respective organization process. And then last, the section that is growing tremendously, even as we speak now, using AI, doing your process without losing your voice. And what we don't want to do is penalize organizations for using an AI component. However, just making sure that when you use an AI system, making sure that the organization program and services remain upfront and it's not swallowed by this eloquent presentation that Chat has put together, or Claude, or Microsoft Pilot has put together, Copilot has put together. So these are some of the key areas that we feel are important to our processes that could help organizations possibly get across that finish line. All right, next slide.
All right.
Elsa.
Yes. Hi again, everybody. So let's dive in. So this particular slide, really, you got to really think about it as alignment. How do you align with the funding priorities of the organizations that funding organizations that you are seeking funding from? Most proposals are in decline because the program is weak. Most of the time, it's because they submitted to the wrong funder or to the wrong cycle, or you did not really take the time to look at the priorities of the funder to understand how you best align with their opportunity. So alignment, not quality or program alone, is often the first filter for reviewers. So starting with reviewing and understanding giving priorities before drafting anything. This may sound super obvious. The first step that is most commonly missed is because a lot of people are looking at a deadline and rushing to submit an application. So teams often draft something first and then see if it fits with the funder that they're submitting to, which sometimes can read as generic to reviewers who see dozens of applications, hundreds of applications in a given cycle. So my advice would be to align, maybe create a worksheet that's kind of like an alignment worksheet that you put together that has the funder's stated priority, and see if it matches to whatever it is that your ask is, all in one sentence. And if you can't fill that out cleanly, then maybe you should pause and reconsider what you're submitting for. And also, when the opportunity is available, connect with the funder to discuss your program or project. Some of us are open to having conversations to see if there's program alignment prior to you submitting a proposal. Now, the caveat here is that some funders, because they receive public dollars, like our friends at CSE, are not allowed to have conversations with potential grantees about alignment. However, we at Quantum do. So reaching out to the program officer, really reading through the funder's website to see who you may contact to have a connection, to create some sort of connection. So that way you are really using your time wisely and you don't submit for something that you may get declined for. The next one is confirming that your project aligns with a currently open focus area. Sometimes priorities shift for some funders. For us, we're a health funder. We look at health through various lenses, more broadly through social determinants of health. So anything that's housing, food, transportation, anything that contributes to the health and well-being of the community in Palm Beach County, we look at that. It's not just healthcare, but for some funders, things may change year over year. They may be funding food this year, and then next year that has shifted to youth programming. So really doing your homework, maybe taking 30 minutes, an hour to really dig through what the project priorities or the priorities for that particular funder are really goes a long way. And checking geographic scope and population served, eligibility rules. Sometimes those are really hard disqualifiers. For us, again, I think all of us here just focus on Palm Beach. So that's a plus, and most of you know that. But if it's tied to, sorry, I have my notes here and I'm kind of going through them because, we always need notes. So if there aren't preferences for a funder, if it's more than one county or two counties, you really have to take a look and look at the geographic scope. If someone's just funding in the Glades, then you need to make sure that you look at everything that they put on their website and their eligibility rules. So sometimes if you look at their FAQs or on the footnotes, frequently asked questions, you're able to get clues as to what those rules may be. And then look at clues in past grantee lists and annual reports. This is always a good one. As a former grant writer, that was something that I always did. You get to look at the 990s for the organizations. Sometimes there's the entire list of who they've funded in that prior year, in that year. And that kind of gives you an idea as to what that funder usually funds and what types of organizations, and also the amounts. So when sometimes we get asked, how much should we ask for? Looking at those 990s can give you a good idea as to what you could request. So the takeaways here are really guidelines and RFPs. The primary source is really read those for fit and read the fine print. Looking at the 990s and annual reports shows what funders actually paid out and not just what we sometimes put on our websites. Sometimes that information is not available on a website. So doing a little digging on your own really goes a long way. And looking at the past grantee list is also something that gives you a clue as to whether or not you're a fit with that particular funder. So maybe ask yourself, have they funded anything like my program before? Is our budget size in their typical range? And does our population or geography match their pattern? And what a program officer recognizes as a fit on paper. So that's understanding for anybody else wants to chime in, Daryl or Randy?
I'm sure. Just quickly, I think one of the key components of this section is make sure, as Elsa said earlier, you are reviewing in its entirety the respective potential funder guidelines and priority. It's not a cookie cutter type process where you can go from the community foundation, use the same proposal for the Quantum Foundation, and then copy that over into CSC's process. Even when you look at targeted populations, those guidelines around what are the populations that your organization is serving. So just be mindful of those things. And then that last point, I think Elsa on the right-hand side touched on, chasing funding. Because the money is there doesn't necessarily mean it's a fit for your organization and program services. And we do find often that organizations will do a little mission drift because there are resources on the table to be accessed. You see program and services that they're requesting funding for, but may not be aligned with their organization's mission. So just make sure that you're putting your organization's strategies, mission, and vision first, and not just because there's money there, and let me see how I could potentially access it.
So I'll just build off of what Elsa was just talking about, and actually, just to keep you on your toes, I'm going to go right to left on this one because we've already talked about applying under the right focus area, and I would definitely emphasize that. I think one thing to keep in mind is when funders have put together a request for proposals or an application or whatever you want to call it, there's actually a lot of work that goes into that. So uh, you know, be aware that they've indicated what they're looking for. They've indicated the funding that they're interested in the areas that they're interested in funding, and so really research those and get the background on those and find the ones that you're the best match for. I've often, to put it even, I guess, more bluntly, is any idea that you're going to propose something completely different than a funder has said they're looking for, and it's just going to be so compelling that they're going to fund it anyways, is probably wishful thinking. There's been a lot of, they really spend a lot of time strategically figuring out what they want to focus their money on, and that's what they're looking for. The only other thing I think I'd say about focus areas, and I know we do this with our Great Ideas Initiative and other funders do, they'll have more than one focus area when they put out a request for proposals. And be a little careful about kind of checking all the boxes, thinking that would be a good way to do it. I would really, my advice would be really figure out which focus area your strongest one is. I mean, if you're equally strong in more than one, there's certainly nothing wrong unless that funder says you have to pick one. There's nothing wrong with picking more than one. But sometimes I'm concerned that it's clear to me that a proposal is very much about one focus area, and I think they could have really focused their proposal on making the case for that focus area and how strong they are in that focus area. For example, when we do the review process, we often get more proposals than any one team could review. So we have teams of people, and so we group by those focus areas. So it's very possible that the proposals that are kind of making the same case as you are being reviewed together. So you really would want to then have your strongest foot forward when they're being reviewed. Another thing, I guess, about maybe some insight into the review process is recognizing that as funders, we are often going to get a lot of proposals. Sometimes hundreds of applications or proposals come in when we ask for them. We just did our Great Ideas Initiative, and initially 77 proposals came in, 67 of them which met all the eligibility requirements. So, and I know some of the foundations receive even more of that. So just keep in mind something, reviewers of proposals are people too. And, it's just as fun for them as it is for you to read a large application that maybe is repetitive or is, spending too much time on any one area. You really do want to be concise and well organized. I've seen proposals sometimes where there'll be no break in the narrative for pages and pages and pages. So it's helpful sometimes to break up your points, to write it in an organized way that is easy to read. In fact, a good pointer is to make sure you're having somebody else read your proposal before you actually submit it, if nothing else, for that kind of input of, was it clear? What do they understand what you're breaking out? Because some of us, we worked in fields for a long time. We know exactly what we want to do. And so much of the information we put in a proposal is kind of second nature to us. But that doesn't always mean it's going to be, come across that way to somebody reviewing your proposal who doesn't know all that information. Um, and so, and that the last point on there is also a good one of be sure to point out what is different about your proposal, and provide some background on that. It's good to have new ideas. It's good to have innovative ways of doing things, but simply making that as a statement that this is a new way to do something or this is an innovative way, is making a lot of assumptions that the reviewer is going to understand them. So what you really want to do is be able to describe how you're different and how you're new and why, because of what you're doing that's new, you're going to get better results. And so you kind of need to lay that case out a little bit. I do sometimes read proposals that just kind of state things like nobody else does it this way, or this is a new innovative way to do something. But I don't have all that background when I'm reading it to really understand what you might mean by why is it new? Why is it innovative? How is it different? And then the last one, just submitting a clear and complete application. Make sure you're answering all the questions. I definitely have facilitated review processes, and I see the frustration of reviewers who are maybe reading a proposal and they're intrigued, they're interested in the proposal, but then there's significant information left out. And it's almost a frustration to reviewers because if they're doing a rating process or whatever other way they're evaluating it, it's difficult for them to evaluate it if not all of the information is there that they were expecting. So be sure to answer all the questions. I know sometimes we're bad as funders and we ask complicated questions, or we ask, 3 questions in one thing. But that's where really, as the writer of your proposal, you really need to be meticulous and make sure you're answering all parts of that question and all the questions that are asked. And of course, follow the format that they allow. If you're doing it in an online application, you may have to type your draft in sort of a Word document or something because you may have limitations to how many words and letters. So you kind of give it your first crack and then see how that fits into their application. It is true that in some scenarios, again, I mentioned as a governmental funder, there's some things that if your proposal's incomplete, we simply can't accept it because it wouldn't be fair to the other people applying. So you're really running a risk if you leave something out. And if there's a reason you have to leave something out, provide that explanation. Don't just leave it out and assume that you'll be asked why it wasn't there. I guess next slide.
Next slide. I think this is Elsa. Is this me?
Yeah, that's you. I'm the next one.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. So application component. This is where I mentioned earlier in the application component overview section that we looked at a couple of areas, but recognize that these are probably some of the key areas that organizations tend to trip up on when they're submitting their proposals. So under program description, state the problem or need and why it matters. And so we truly want to understand, why is it a challenge for this particular program, for this particular issue that you're addressing? What's the true problem that you're seeking to address? Don't just talk about, well, in Palm Beach County, we see that there's a great need for more food. But why do you know that there's a great need for more food? Please provide more details behind that. Talk about the demographics of the population that you potentially serving. And then the next one, describe activities in the plan, specific language, what will actually happen. And so this is, I think, one of the areas my team and I, we talk about often is there's not truly a plan of action in place of how you're going to address it. Some may talk about the problem that exists, but don't necessarily speak to how your programs and services will address the issue that is at hand. So be clear when you're talking about the issue that you're trying to address, be very specific and use specific language on how you plan to address that need at hand. Define measurable and realistic goals and outcomes. This is an area where we see all the time where I think, and maybe Elsa and Randy can chime in on this. I think we run into cases where you have organizations submit outcomes and goals that they think us as funders want to see, but they might not even be realistic for your request or even your organization size. So make sure that when you're submitting your program measurements and outcomes, make sure they're realistic. Make sure it's something that you can potentially accomplish. And the worst thing for you to do is submit some outcomes and goals that, at the end of the day, it is going to be more than challenging for you as an organization to potentially achieve. And then lastly, explain how the program advances the funders' priorities. This is the piece we talked about earlier. When you talk about guidelines that the organization has in place, how does this particular program align with, we say funders, but I like to say community partners, because at the end of the day, we're partners when you receive that funding or from either of us, either our organizations. How does this support their organization mission as well? So for the Community Foundation, I'll use an example of our economic opportunities. Any organization that applies on their economic opportunities, we're looking for programs and services that are vocational type programs, programs that are workforce development programs. These programs are putting individuals in a position to increase their knowledge in a specific area that will hopefully increase their gainful wages. And so at the end of the day, when we meet with the organization that is doing this type of work, we can actually go back and talk to our funders, potentially our fund holders that could potentially give us more money to support the work. So, but if the program is not aligned with any of our priorities, it's going to be challenging for us to say, hey, we want to support the work that you're doing as one of our potential community partners. Then to the right here, we have targeted population. Name specifically who will benefit: age, geography, income level, and other defining traits. It's important for us as organizations as we're looking at specific programs and services. And this also, I think, aligns with the focus area that your organization is seeking to address. One thing you don't want to do is submit a proposal and a request for a demographic or a focus area that does not align with the funders or community partners' targeted population. For instance, if you're doing mental health, and the mental health is specifically for youth in South Palm Beach County between the ages of 13 to 18, it's not going to be beneficial for you to submit a proposal for youth of all ages. That doesn't align with what we're looking for. We're looking for a specific target population. So make sure the target population is very clear when you submit your proposal. Submit the need with local data and not just national statistics. National statistics are awesome, but when you come down to the local level, that is where the resources are being used to impact the specific population that you're targeting. So make sure you have clear data on that specific population that you're serving on the local level. Estimate how many individuals and families will be served. This is always one of those areas, I think, we look at it not necessarily from the largest number that you can serve, but once again, a realistic number that you can serve. If you're requesting $10,000 and you're saying the number served is going to be, we're going to serve 20,000 with these 10,000, that's pretty phenomenal. But it could be, is it really realistic that you're going to be able to serve that many people with that amount of resources? So just be mindful when you're estimating your number of individuals you plan to serve, make sure it's aligned with not only the program description, but also the budget that you will submit that will support the work. And then last, show how the population matches the funder's stated focus area. If you're looking for, once again, I'll use an example with our economic opportunity area. So how is the program that you're requesting for aligning and ensuring that the individuals that are going to be served are going to be better off once they finish the program? Once they finish the program, will these individuals receive these certifications that will help them get a better job? So once again, making sure the population that you're serving matches the actual focus area that you're seeking funding up under. Anything from Elsa and Brandy? All right.
The only thing I'd add, Daryl, is one sort of perspective to look at when you're trying to describe your program and making it clear. I've seen a lot of proposals that will kind of be written from the provider standpoint of, we're going to provide this, we're going to provide this, we're going to do this. And while that is important, it's sometimes hard to figure out from the client's perspective, from who you're serving's perspective, how does that look? And sometimes shifting that focus and thinking of it as describing what your client's going to receive is a better way, or another way to write it so that it's clear. And it'll often then cover some things that often get overlooked, like, is it something that's going to be provided 3 times a week? Or is it a daily activity? Or, is it once a week? So it's just maybe taking a different lens and thinking, is this clear what somebody is going to receive from us if we're funded?
Thanks, Randy. All right. Next slide, Corey.
All right, so this slide, really, we will just look at the difference between what is a program request and what is appropriate for a general operating request. A lot of times we get proposals that kind of, there's no clear definition. Are you asking dollars for a program to make sure that you either expand or you create a new program or a pilot program within your organization, or is it really going to just provide operational dollars to make sure that the lights stay on? So with a program request, you use this when you can define clear, measurable outcomes tied to one initiative within your organization. Outcomes that are measured at the program level to typically tell us, something like 60% of participants will be employed within 90 days. And the budget that you attach is really draws the line to that specific program's cost and activities. So that's one thing that you can take a look at if you're trying to define what you're going to ask for. Program requests will fall in that. It's also best fit for a new program that you're trying to pitch, or to expand a program, grow a program within the organization, or to pilot something, whether it's with a collaborative community organization, if you're doing collaborative work with someone else, anything that's innovative and something that the organization can track closely. And that can benefit from clear evaluation stories. Usually you get stories from the outcomes of a program initiative. For general operating, it really is tied to the organization as a whole. So it's not just that one initiative. The outcomes that you get from this are framed at the organizational level, like things like overall reach, your financial health, the progress on your mission. How is this going to make sure that you continue to do the work that you do across all programs that you provide, rather than just one program's metrics? It also is best fit for stable, established organizations with a proven track record, where funders can comfortably trust the judgment of the organization. However, There are organizations that do general operating for new and emerging nonprofits, what sometimes we like to call grassroots nonprofits. We at Quantum have our initiative, Quantum in the Community. Every year we give out a little over $1.2 million to over 130, 140 organizations that are just doing really great work throughout the county, but they're growing their infrastructure, they're growing their capacity. So general operating can be for smaller organizations that are starting to grow, depending on the funder that you do the request for. So that's why we go back to reading the guidelines and ensuring that you are aligning with the priorities of that particular funder. When to use either. So if you're looking at your own organization, that's really where you get with your team and really see where the gaps lie, if it's on the programmatic side or if it's on the operational side. And again, aligning it with the funder and their language. So funders, words like initiative, project, pilot, specific outcomes, those are tied to programs, a program request. And words like capacity building, unrestricted operating support, that's general operating request. And then always check the application questions as well, because you can get clues from that. Questions about specific activities, plus a line item budget. Again, those are point to a program. So, and anything that has to do with a percentage of the overall budget with no line items, that typically goes to a general operating request. So just factor in the track record of what you're doing across your programs, and then define where you will do the ask, what type of ask you will do. So do a self-check. Could I show a funder a before or after for one specific thing? That's a program. And if it's going to make your organization stronger, that's general operating. After you've identified a need, match the ask to the funder's stated preference. Again, going back to those priorities. And that just kind of signals where you would like to go. And one thing that we are seeing is right-sizing the ask. Sometimes the ask really, what we're seeing is that if your organization's operational budget is $400,000 and you're asking for a program that will cost you $1 million and you're asking for 75,000, that doesn't really right-size, your ask, and sometimes doesn't read as credible to a reviewer. So just be honest about what your dollars will go to, whether it's transparency is key, right? We always say that even in the funder world and even across with our funded partners. So just describe how you intend to use those dollars also helps us understand fully the full picture of what you're trying to do within your organization. Anybody else want to chime in? Daryl, Randy?
Sure. Just one thing here, short. When you're submitting your request for a potential community partner that funds either program requests or general operating requests, just really make sure the requests are clear in terms of if you're submitting a general operating request, if you check that box, I'll just use us, the Community Foundation, for example. If you check that box that says general operating, make sure you are presenting the organization as a whole and not saying this is organization ABC and you go right into a specific program. Because once you go down that route of requesting general operating and it's a program request, for our team, it's almost like an automatic decline. Because it doesn't align with general operating. It should have been a program request. And so that's what we tend to see the hang up, not necessarily on the program request side. Program requests are typically pretty clear in terms of making sure it's a specific type of activity that is being presented, but it's just on the general operating side. We get many requests that are not actually general operating. It's focused towards a specific program once they complete their description. So just be mindful of the two. When you're talking about a program, as Elsa said, it's a specific service with goals that relate to that one specific program or initiative. But when you go to the general operating side, it's broadly talking about the organization as a whole.
And if you have doubts, pick up the phone, send an email for those funders that you really want to just ask. Sometimes, to gain that clarity, you need to just make that connection to see how you will move forward.
Next slide.
Okay, and this slide's about the exciting topic of budgets. And once again, I'm going to take them from right to left, mostly because we've kind of mentioned these first two, I think, already. Doing the research, reading the guidelines closely, one of the things you'll often see in there is a maximum amount that you can ask for. Certainly respect that maximum amount. There's no better indication that you didn't closely read the guidelines than asking for $50,000 when $40,000 is what's available or is the limit. And there are some funders that may be the end of the conversation because you asked for the limit. There are others that might work with you on that, but it's not a good way to start when right off the bat as a funder if we know we have a cap and people have requested over that. Also, something related to that, and I think this might be a little bit more common in the public sector, sometimes it'll indicate how much money is available total and an indication of how many grants they're looking to give out or how many contracts they're looking to give out. So sometimes do the math on that. If $3 million is available and they want to fund 10 programs, then each one is roughly going to be 300,000. So that's not to say if there's no limitation that you wouldn't ever want to go over that amount, obviously. But if you do, you need a stronger and stronger budget, a stronger and stronger proposal, because again, if the funder's coming out and saying we're looking to fund 10 organizations and this is all the money that we have, if you're asking for more and more of that money, you're going to really need to have more and more of a strong case. I have been in situations where $3 million was available and somebody asked for $3 million, even though it was obvious that there were going to be multiple organizations funded. I will tell you that was an interesting conversation among the review team about that proposer asking for all of the money that was available, and I believe not even serving the entire target population that was being, that we were looking to cover. The middle box is just, again, Elsa mentioned this, kind of right sizing your request. Definitely, it is often a topic of discussion if you're asking for more money than you even currently have or have ever managed before. And if that is allowed, some funders, that's not even allowed, or there's very set rules on how much they would fund somebody in relation to their total budget. But even if that is allowed, I can tell you that, again, the conversations among a review team is often going to be concerns about that. And you may want to address that then in your proposal, recognize the fact that you would be making a large increase in how are you being responsible for those funds? How are you going to manage those funds? If, for example, your organization has had a total budget of $50,000 and you're asking for money in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, recognizing that there's going to be an additional responsibility of financial management that you haven't faced before. So address that in your proposal. How are you going to face that? How are you going to deal with that? And then, of course, submitting the right information. You always want to provide a line item budget. You want to have, a dollar amount that you're asking for that line item and then a narrative explanation of what it is. I will say I always look at narratives two ways, and I've been a budget reviewer before. I always look for two things when I'm looking at narrative. One is a description of basically what is that item and why is it in the budget. You want to make sure, Elsa made a very good point. You want to make sure that at some point before you submit your full proposal, that you're looking at your budget and your proposal, your program together and making sure that they make sense together. For example, you don't want something in your budget that you didn't talk about in your proposal. For example, I used to review a lot of after-school programs, and sometimes, I would see in the budget they had a cost for transportation, but in their whole proposal, they never talked about transporting kids anywhere. So you want to make sure the two things make sense together. That is a common conversation among reviewers or among review teams, that they're not sure the budget makes sense compared to the proposal. So you want to have, what is that budget line item and why is it in the budget? But also a calculation. Why is it that amount? not just a description of what it is and then a request that that's going to be $5,000, but why $5,000? Even if it's an estimate, and acknowledge you're estimating that because we're serving 50 kids, it's going to cost $100 a kid. That's fine if it's an estimate, but otherwise you're leaving the reviewer to completely wonder why it is $5,000. A narrative explanation for each line item should really include what it is and why, but also why that amount, a calculation for why that amount. And then also in your budget, often you're submitting budgets where you might be asking for, let's say, $50,000, but your program actually costs $100,000. So you're intending on proposing it and getting funding from other sources. So be sure to indicate, those line items as well, and show that they're coming from other funders, and put it in your proposal, kind of bring it up to date. So if you're expecting funding from other funders, is that because you've applied, or is that because it's confirmed? That can make a big difference, and you really don't want, again, to leave review teams kind of wondering about that, especially, and again, thinking of the size of your budget. If a significant part of your program was going to be coming from other funders, the one you're requesting at the moment is really going to have that question about whether it's committed or not already. And of course, it's a big advantage that it's committed. It doesn't always have to be committed, but if it is committed, it's a huge advantage to your proposal, and definitely good information for a reviewer to know.
So just one note here, just to build upon what Randy mentioned, more specific to submit the right information under the budget narrative section. What my team and I tend to see often is a budget is submitted, and once we request the budget narrative, it's almost as if they've copied the line items and just threw it in the budget narrative. So they'll say salaries 2,000, supplies 3,000, but it doesn't really talk to why that is a part of the program. And so I think it's for those organizations that have run into those issues and challenges, make sure when you're doing your budget narrative, it's not just cut and paste of the budget into the budget narrative. Add context to each of those line items so we can truly understand how this is going to support the work that you're attempting to accomplish through your program. All right, final slide, Elsa.
Final slide. And this is a big one. As Daryl alluded to earlier, we are seeing a lot of AI drafted or proposals, and the language is the same. So we don't know who's who. And sometimes, the work that you all are doing, it resembles each other, and it shows up in the generic language that is used. So if we were to ask everyone here in the room, if you use an AI, most of you probably would say yes, which is not a bad thing. This is not about not using AI, right? This is a tool that is available to us now. It increases capacity for a lot of organizations, someone that may not have a grant writer. This really does something for those organizations to kind of move the needle. It also can improve efficiencies. But as reviewers are getting to see hundreds and hundreds of applications, between 50 to 300, 400, even in one cycle, if you're an annual funder, it's really hard to really differentiate what your organization is doing if it sounds like the next like the other proposals. So here it's more about us being able to differentiate who you are, and we can really pick up quickly who has been using AI, because again, it's very generic language, very even. It doesn't really get to the heart of your work. So with that, it flattens your passion and your specificity. This is what makes the proposal memorable. Who are you? What's at the heart of your work? How many staff do you have? All these nuances that you bring to the work, the kind that makes the difference in the community, gets lost when something is drafted and placed through ChatGPT and Claude, and no one else has eyes but the grant writer. So one thing that you could do really is name your clients in here, tell us how the program operates, like from intake to dismissing a client, let's say, that it put in an exact phrase that a participant has used, really bring a little bit more of who you are into the proposal. If a draft doesn't have those, it hasn't been personalized. So personalizing your drafts, personalizing your proposals is very important for us to be able to really get the full picture of what you are doing. Another really, really, really big one. And I'm sure most of you, as you're engaging with other workshops across the county related to AI, hallucination is a big thing. ChatGPT and Claude don't get everything right. Specifically, the facts and the statistics, outcomes. Sometimes they just put numbers in there that have no relation to the type of outcomes that your organization does, who and how many people it serves. So this is like at the highest stake. It's the biggest caveat because it fabricates statistics in a proposal, and it can really disqualify an application very quickly. Like if you look at something and then you're looking at the next proposal and then the same numbers show up, you're like, okay, is this a pattern that we recognize, or is this true to what the community needs are here in Palm Beach County? So it really can damage a relationship that you've worked really hard to build with a funder if you are not really caring for putting a proposal forward that really tells us the story behind your work. So treat every AI draft as an unsourced narrative until you personally trace it back to your own data. And then a program description that no longer matches what your staff would actually say out loud. This is another good gut check. Read the draft out loud, or better yet, have the program director. Again, sometimes large organizations have grant writers that may or may not know the depth of your work. If your program staff is not saying this to other people, if you're in a big room with with your team and they're not saying this out loud, it really shouldn't go into the proposal. So it's really just about infusing your voice. So the left side, that green part where it says keeping your voice and your impact, really think about it this way. Think about AI as a tool that handles your organizing, your outlining of your work, and tightening the narrative. And then keep anything that's related to your first institutional knowledge and your first-hand knowledge of your team to the stories, data, the outcomes in your own words, because that really tells us, again, who you are. Specificity is what makes a proposal memorable. So protect the details that AI can't know, like the real clients, the exact words a participant used, the stories that lie behind it. And then every number in an AI draft is unverified until you trace it back to yourself. Always think about it that way. AI-generated facts and statistics are really a hypothesis, and without a citable source, it's not real. And reviewers can spot it really quickly, and it can erode trust. And then having a staff member who knows the program, give it a final read is very important. So some funders are now starting to ask whether or not you use AI. Don't be afraid to say that you did, but at the same time, make sure that when you do put something forward, it really speaks to who you are. And if you really need to get with your program team to get to the depth or really tell stories in a way that are compelling, do that. Daryl, Randy?
Now, I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. I guess I always feel like I'm the hype man, because every time someone asks anything extra to say, Daryl jumps in. So, but this one, awesome. And I guess just to reiterate, just make sure you're verifying information that you're putting into AI, and truly make sure it's aligned with your organization and the program services, and making sure that it's just not a eloquent play on words that is being presented to the potential funder or community partner. Because like Elsa said, we get enough of these proposals in that we can see where AI has been embedded in it to a point where it actually has taken over the message and minimize the impact of your voice as the organization leaders. All righty. So, whoa, we got a lot of hands up there. I'll turn it over to the community impact team so they can present any of the questions that were put into the Q&A box there.
Yeah, thanks, team, for your comments in the presentation today. Because for me, a lot of the things landed, and I hope they landed for our partners on the call. There were questions situated in both the Q&A and in the chat, and so I'll start with one question that I saw in the chat. And it stated, how can we determine whether funders will support not smaller nonprofits? How do you know if that's something that a funder would do?
I mean, I can speak from my experience. It's having the opportunity to meet with an organization and talk directly with their staff when the opportunity is available. I say take advantage of it and have a true discussion with the respective staff member about your program, your service that you're providing, and where would potentially an organization like yours fit within the partnership with them. So I think that's one way of really looking at it, is just connecting with those organizations. And I think also when you look at what Elsa mentioned earlier, having access to the 990 of funders, but also even on our website, you can see the list of organizations that we fund. So you can kind of pick and choose between those which are relatively large and those that are small, to kind of give you somewhat of an idea of the scope of and sizes of different types of organizations that we fund.
Yeah. For us, I mean, I kind of shared this earlier, but we created Quantum in the community for this very thing. A lot of the organizations that are emerging or start, they're doing basic needs. They're doing anything that relates to very direct work with the community. So we understand that, sometimes they don't have the capacity or the staff to be able to do things the way that they'd like to. So we created Quantum in the community to really address some of those needs, and the organizations with budgets under $500,000 can apply once a year for that initiative.
Yeah, we kind of did the same thing years ago before the pandemic. We realized while we built these kind of systems of care and were funding evidence-based programs, they also were sometimes really complicated and involved large programs getting off the ground. And so we had kind of limited ourselves to larger nonprofits. And that's one reason why we did the Great Ideas Initiative, to specifically open up an opportunity for smaller nonprofits. So actually, the current, it's always been under $1 million, organizations under $1 million. We sometimes tweak those things from year to year. That's one that could get changed. But it is intended to specifically focus on smaller nonprofits. And at the moment, there's not a minimum to that. That also could be changing. But it's also, of course, not quite as large, the amount of money that we're funding as well. But we have a specific opportunity for that.
Great, thank you guys. This next question is gonna kind of take us on a pendulum swing to the other end of the budget spectrum. And so we have someone that has asked, how do you suggest someone write about budget when they have a very large operating budget? Obviously, they're still seeking grants and every bit helps, but they often feel maybe they're disregarded because of the larger operating budget. So how would you suggest orgs with large budgets write about that?
I can start off. The hype guy will start off. I think for the Community Foundation, we recognize that as nonprofits in general, we are sustained by either private donors or grants that come into our organizations. Whether you're large or you're small, you're seeking those types of resources that come into your organization. So from our perspective, if you have a large operating budget, we will still take under consideration your request if it aligns with our organization's strategies under our under one of our 3 key focus areas. We don't push away organizations because they have a $10 million budget, especially if we know they're doing great work, they're serving the need. And once again, if that proposal itself speaks to addressing a need and it is done in a way that's different from all the others you see through, I would say it increases your chance of getting the grant. It's not a guarantee. I always throw that disclaimer out there. It's not a guarantee, but writing based on your program and your organization needs, I think is just to stay true to who you are, and with the hopes that the organization that you're submitting to, they don't shy away from organizations that have significant budgets.
Hope you feel better soon.
I just want to say, from our perspective, we do fund organizations with large operating budgets, but I think when you're doing the budget narrative, just telling us that your budget is the XYZ doesn't really tells us the full story of the financial position of the organization or the resources that are available to you for your program. So I think that goes back to speaking to the why of your ask, and that can get infused into why do you need these dollars in order for you to be able to address the specific funding gap. Sometimes it may be a required match. Say that. So that way we're able to really understand the need of your work. So the budget does tell a story. You making it clear for reviewers really goes a long way to really understand and paint a clear picture.
I'll just agree. We don't have a limitation on the other side of how large an organization can be. Obviously, it would be more of these targeted RFPs where we're looking for a particular service or a particular type of program, and we would be funding that program. So there'd be no limitation. The only maybe advice I would have would be if you're large, I imagine you're doing multiple things, and explaining in your proposal how maybe this newer program you're proposing would be supported by those other things that you're doing is often very helpful in a proposal to make sense out of it.
Thank you for your comments on that last question. Because we hear it from both sides. We hear smaller nonprofit, do you guys accept the proposal from us? Larger nonprofit feels like they aren't being seen. And so I appreciate your responses there. We have a really juicy question. This next question is really juicy, and I'm going to read it just as it was written. Can you speak to how you, as funders, are using AI in reviewing applications and making funding decisions, if at all?
Well, I can speak on behalf of the Community Foundation. We have not necessarily used AI to date. to support our grant making processes in reviewing applications and budgets. However, it is something that we are looking into potential ways that could make our work a little more efficient. And the reason being, as Randy talked a little earlier about, be mindful of the requests that funders get. So this year we have, well, last year now, we have 462 requests that were submitted through the Community Foundation grant process. You can imagine that split up amongst 3 team members having to read all those proposals and those budgets. So if there is a way that we can use AI, not once again to do all of our work, but to assist us in the process, that could eliminate some time for us, we are beginning to look at those opportunities and seeing how it could potentially support our work that we're doing through our competitive grant process.
Yeah, I can say too, we're exploring how we can use AI. One example of where we did use it to help us, kind of the same way I think we said when you're writing proposals, use it as a tool to help you write your proposal, not write it for you. When we reviewed our budgets last for the last Great Ideas Initiative, we did have an AI sort of analysis of that of the budgets that we used, and then we, as the reviewers, then looked at that and to some extent factored that in. But the ratings and the comments to the review team that made final decisions, those all came from us as reviewers. But we did use it, and it caught things like, where calculations were inaccurate, those kind of things, where costs were reasonable or not. So, we are exploring how to use it, but I don't see that the process would ever drive a funding decision, and certainly not be turned over to AI as a funding decision. The other use I could see that we'll really explore is that sort of categorizing of proposals in any way that it just makes the job easier of kind of dividing them up and assigning them to review teams and that kind of process. But again, I don't foresee taking the human aspect of reading a proposal, understanding it, and seeing how it fits into what we want to fund.
Yeah, much like Daryl and Randy have said, we don't use it for funding decisions. If anything, it's really just an efficiency tool. So if we get large amounts of data, we can synthesize some of that. But even then, human judgment, our own eyes, the relationships, the conversations that we have come into play with everything, and that's not going to change. So. We know that, just as much as ChatGPT and Claude can hallucinate on numbers, it can also be biased towards, the work that some organizations may be doing. So we take that into account.
Great, thank you all for your responses. I was watching a Microsoft Copilot webinar, and they said it's called Copilot, not Autopilot. And I think this is true to what we're saying here, right? We don't want to remove that human aspect out of what's being done in this great work. The next question that we have is about multi-year requests. So they want to know, are U.S. funders entertaining multi-year requests? Is it by invitation only? It seems that many funders are only entertaining annual support, and just curious what the trend is.
That may have come from a comment I made about and that would be more, again, a reference to kind of our regular funding process. When we do a request for proposals, it is typically for multi-year funding. For the most part, we've been again, trying to build a system of services. So for the most part, we continue funding those as long as they are working and achieving outcomes. So those are available, but they often are in a sort of targeted way. So the most recent time we were looking for youth development programs serving a certain age, of kids. Other times we've even been as specific as looking for a specific program like the Nurse Family Partnership Program, where we're looking for folks to implement that very specific program. So it is usually more in a targeted way, But once we go through that whole process of an RFP, we are committed for multiple years.
So we do multi-year as well, but we have been leaning towards doing more annual support, considering that there have been funding gaps in the past year for a lot of organizations. So to increase our reach, we are considering more annual support for the time being, but we also look at things on a case-by-case basis. There are organizations that are doing really direct health care work in the community that we have funded for on and off for many years since our inception. So really having those conversations and looking at things project by project really gives us an idea as to how to fund and for how long to fund the organizations as a whole.
I would say for in general, I know multi-year tends to be probably trending up as foundations are recognizing. Well, I think they've always known, but just wanted to be in that space consistently. That multi-year provides more flexibility. It prevents organizations having to submit a request, get funding, and in the middle of that funding, have to turn around and apply for funding again from the same organization, not knowing if they're going to get it. It allows for them to really focus on the program aspect, knowing that the money is kind of in the bank, sort of say. So we know that those things are happening. Single year support, I don't think that's going anywhere. And in terms of the Community Foundation, right now, we're not entertaining for this upcoming year any multi-year grant making at this moment. Could it change before we roll it out in November? Possibly, but at this moment, I would say any organization that is planning to apply through our grant process plan to submit a single year request.
Thank you, team, for those comments. We have one last question. It's a good question. When you are shortlisted for a grant, having checked all the boxes and are asked to stand before a panel review team, what is the team looking for when determining who ultimately receives the grant?
Well, that's a good one because we haven't done any panel reviews ourselves. I don't know if Randy or Elsa has done any.
No, we
Maybe
do
we should
not.
have the county on, huh?
Yeah. Well, we don't. It sounds a little like you might be asking about something different, but if it helps, when we are doing our our larger funding, we often have an interview process. So we will review the initial proposals. Shortlist is maybe a good way to put it. Sometimes it's all of the proposals, depending on how many there are and how much they really addressed what we were looking for. But there'll often be an interview part to that. Now, the primary purpose of that interview is to clarify what was in the proposal. So it usually does not, in fact, many times for us, it doesn't involve a presentation at all. It's actually an interview. We have questions and we ask those and are looking for the answers to those questions. My only advice there is to be as direct as possible in answering those questions. It's an opportunity to clarify something, and so your goal should be to clear up whatever the reviewers aren't clear about. But other than that, we don't really just do sort of a general panel before making a final decision.
And I would say in terms of panels, I think it really depends on the once the panel makeup, the organization who is running the panel, and them potentially having some type of rubric set up where they can actually do a checkbox and rate an organization who's presenting, rate their proposal. With then, as always, there's that objective side, but there's some subjectivity that is built in there as well. So I think it really just depends on the panel and really what they're looking for and the rubric or scoring matrix they have set up in order to get them to make a logical and decision in terms of who will receive funding. It's just based on panel by panel, I would say.
So it looks like all of our questions have been answered. I'm just checking back through the chat. Looks like all the questions have been answered in the chat and then the
So
Q&A.
there are a couple in the chat here. There's one that love to hear your current thinking on collaborative grant proposals. Any thoughts?
I think we always love to see collaborative proposals, but again, when we're funding, looking for a particular type of program or to address a certain area, that's usually the bigger priority. I think it is a plus if you're collaborating, particularly if you're collaborating with purpose. So if you're collaborating with someone because you are recognizing they do a strong job of something and you want to work with that, we really love to see that as opposed to trying to maybe your organization trying to take on something that would be new, even though that hasn't been your background. That's a strong way to present a proposal. I will say the one thing whenever you're proposing a collaborative type effort, you always do want to be clear though, the sort of follow the money question. Who's going to ultimately be so if we fund that proposal, who is ultimately going to be responsible for the money? We always have to be able to answer that question on our side of it.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I mean, we love collaborative proposals, and like Randy said, all those things make sense. But then also really make sure that there are MOUs between the organizations. Just have a clear understanding as to who's going to do what, who's going to handle the dollars, who's going to handle the reporting. I think that's all important too when you're doing collaborative efforts with other community organizations.
Yeah, I would say maybe the last point is making sure the collaborate makes sense. Don't do it just because you hear funders say, hey, we like collaboration. So you go and just throw something together that has no alignment. Make sure the collaborative makes sense and it really speaks to what the proposal is looking to present. Okay, so there's one other in here. If an organization is small but has a strong community impact, how can we determine whether the funder is comfortable funding smaller nonprofits?
I believe we covered that one, Daryl. That was the first question that we.
Oh, the first one?
Mhm.
Okay. Well, I think that may be it then. All right. I think that's it. Well, do you have guys have any parting words, Randy and Elsa?
I just hope that, well, thank you everybody for joining us. We're taking an hour and a half out of your day to listen to us speak on this. You all are doing excellent work in the community, and we just hope that you're able to take something away from this conversation.
Yeah, I think you've heard enough words from me. So thanks to you all for sticking in. It looks like 81 of you have stuck in to the end. So congratulations on that, and good luck with your future grant writing.
And the hype guy will close it out. Once again, on behalf of the Community Foundation, Palm Beach Martin County's Children's Services Council, Palm Beach County, and Quantum Foundation. We greatly appreciate you guys taking the time just to sit with us through this process. We're here to partner with you. We're here to try to support the work that you're doing. And if there's a way that we can support your work outside of the grant making process itself, I think opportunities like today, these webinars are part of our goal as your community partners. So once again, thank you for attending. And if you have any questions, I think our contact information may have been put in the chat section of the webinar. But nevertheless, hey, Community Foundation, you call us, we'll answer. CSC, you guys are going to answer, right? And then Quantum, I think they'll answer too. So we thank you for all the work that you continue to do, and we wish you guys have an awesome rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.